Hi, I'm Aaliyah Paxton. I'm a history and psychology major at St. Scholastica, and I'm a McNair scholar. This summer, I have been developing a coding manual to look at film and media in terms of representation of race and ethnicity. So what I started out with is I found multiple sources that looked at this in terms of stereotypes. So the biggest one, for example, was immediately after the Civil Rights Act of 1966 was passed by Johnson. The US Department of Civil Liberties put out a questionnaire and they got people's opinions of specifically African American folks. A researcher named Neiman in 1994 took multiple Americans' perspective on various races and ethnicities. White, African American, Asian American, Arab American, and she even looked at Jewish and Native American. However, there was not a lot of research on that due to limited numbers where the research was being predominantly done. But anyway, after looking at that, I took the most prevalent terms that were shown in each one. So for example, one that showed up across like multiple races and ethnicities was laziness. That word specifically showed up for African Americans, Latina Americans, and Native Americans. So any terms like that were across more than one category were included. So another more positive coded example would be intelligence. That was across Asian Americans and white Americans. So those traits were included. I also coded for using the MIT personality attributes. They have 632 words that have positive, neutral, and negative connotations. Those were included as well next to it. So those terms were then dropped into a coding manual and to figure out the attributes, whether or not the score is a 1, which is very similar, a 2, which is somewhat similar, or a 3, which is not at all or not applicable if it's not mentioned or brought up in any way, shape, or form, was using the Merriam-Webster dictionary to find the definition of those, and then taking those definitions, maybe adding a word or two to make it more applicable to people if not possible, and then using the exact opposite definition and then finding a happy middle. We'll use laziness for an example since I already talked about that. Merriam-Webster specifically defines it as unwilling to work or expand energy. And then looking at the most accurate antonym was willingly works or expends energy, just the exact opposite coin. And then for somewhat, reluctantly works or expends energy, to find that middle ground between unwilling and willing. These were explained and typed up into a little bit more nicer looking way for the coders, with instructions for that to be on the same page. So the rules that we went with were the most prevalent actions and behaviors, and this was figured out through trial and error, a lot of trial and error. We're starting our 4.0. This is version 4. But so using the most prevalent actions. So for example, Naveen from Princess and the Frog, because most people have seen Disney movies, he's pretty selfish for most of the film. He doesn't really change until the end. So if one of the attributes was selfish, which it is not, surprisingly, egotistical is, but selfish isn't. But if it was selfish, it would be a very much so, because for 90% of the movie, that is the active trait he's trying to overcome. So story-wise, character-wise, display-wise, very much so. And then also best judgment and using it within the idea of the world. For example, in our world, the world we live in, murder is not okay, period, for the most part. However, in like the world of Game of Thrones, if someone insults your father and you kill them, no one will blink an eye. That doesn't go here, but it goes in that world. So you can't use that for a justification of a character being immoral, because that action is justified within the world that character lives in. Me and my advisor, the other people that she's advising, have been nice enough to volunteer and learn how to code and help me code, so it's a little bit more validated having 4 people do it rather than just me, who's biased because they love films and movies. So we're gonna keep coding. We're using like 10 to 20 minute chunks from various films, and we're just using those to code rather than doing long-term to validate this. And then after this is validated, I will hopefully, if everything works out, continue in the fall in empirical methods by actually coding the films and actually doing this project and looking at best picture winners and tracking how they've done, starting that hopefully. If that does get approved, I will need to find more people and train them, but it will already be validated and legitimate at that point, hopefully. Yeah, I really just want to continue this if I get into a grad program and continue to look at media and the psychological effects it has on people, because it's looked at how media affects people and how that will affect other people, like, and seeing whether or not like self-esteem could be affected if there's an overwhelming, negative output of this one community, or if there's an overwhelming positive, if that could potentially benefit or even overinflate and make it come back to the negative side of the circle in some communities. So we'll see what happens.